Every time we tried to make a major decision, my husband's father threatened to cut him off. Obey me, or lose everything, he sneered. My husband begged, it's just money. Instead of arguing, I handed his father a letter. The next day, he opened it and realized he had lost more than just control. I've been married to my husband, Mark, for 12 years now. I love him to death. He's patient, kind, creative. He's a photographer and probably one of the most loyal people you could meet. But he has one big flaw. He won't stand up to his dad. Let me explain. Mark's dad, let's call him Frank, is the classic old school, ego-driven, I built this empire with my bare hands type. Think country club, luxury SUV, casual racism at the dinner table, but he still thinks he's a good man. Frank owns a mid-sized logistics company in Portland, Oregon. It's successful. Not Amazon level, but big enough that he's rich and thinks that makes him smarter than everyone else. He had Mark late in life. Mark was always supposed to take over the business, but he never wanted it. Frank didn't care. He made Mark his legacy project anyway. Now, when Mark's grandmother passed, she left him a trust fund. A big one. The kind that can set you up for life if managed well. But the catch? There's a clause that lets Frank control it until Mark turns 40. He was 35 when all this started. That meant Frank had final say over how the money was used. And he used it to control us. Frank didn't support Mark being a photographer. He called it a cute hobby. He hated that I worked full-time in nonprofit management instead of staying home. He thought our life was beneath what he'd built for Mark. Anytime we made a decision without consulting him, he'd either delay funds or deny access altogether. We tried to move to Seattle for my promotion once. Frank, move and I cut you off. Don't bother calling. We considered adopting a dog. Frank, dogs are dirty. I won't fund vet bills or any emergencies. We bought a second car. Frank, why do you need another car? That's not responsible. I'll freeze the trust for the month. He wasn't even subtle. He treated it like a leash. If we pushed back, he tightened it. Mark would always end up apologizing or backing down. Frank knew exactly what he was doing. And Mark couldn't see a way out. This became Mark's go-to line. When I'd get upset, when I'd suggest we just cut ties, he'd always say, it's just money. And I wanted to believe that. But it wasn't just money. It was our son's medical bills. Our mortgage. It was the future we were trying to build. Frank had inserted himself into every corner of our life, and the only reason we kept letting him was because he held the keys to our stability. I loved Mark. But I was starting to resent him. I didn't marry his dad. A year ago, I found out I was pregnant again. We weren't planning it, but we were excited. I told Mark, and he cried. He hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. We talked about turning his in-home studio into a nursery and getting him a small space downtown. He found one. It was beautiful. Top floor, open light, exposed brick. Perfect for client shoots. We signed the lease, assuming the trust could help with the upfront costs. Frank found out about the studio a week later. He called Mark. I was in the kitchen when it happened. I heard the entire thing. You made this decision without me? I'm not releasing a single cent for that place. You're lucky I don't cut you off entirely. Mark didn't argue. He nodded, stayed quiet, said, okay, Dad. Then he sat on the couch and stared at the floor. I asked him what we were going to do. He looked up at me and said, it's just 5 more years. We can wait. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't about the trust anymore. It wasn't about the money. It was about power. Frank had spent years training Mark to feel small, to stay quiet, to obey. And I realized then, he was never going to stop. Not when we moved. Not when we had another kid. Not even when Mark turned 40. He'd find another way. We were waiting for a clock to run out, thinking that would make us free. But that was never going to happen. Frank didn't care about timelines. He cared about control. And Mark? He was so deep in it, he couldn't see it anymore. I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I wrote a letter. It wasn't long. 2 pages, maybe. I wrote it over 3 nights after Mark and our son went to bed. I printed it, sealed it in a plain envelope, and had it delivered by courier to Frank's house the following Monday. No return address. No signature. Just words he couldn't unread. I told him he had made his son afraid. That he used money as a weapon. I listed every time he had interfered in our life. Every time he had humiliated Mark. Every time he had threatened our family. I told him I had records. Copies of his angry voicemails. Screenshots of his text messages. I told him I knew who sat on his company's board. I knew who his competitors were. I knew who his investors were. I told him if he ever held a dime over our heads again, I'd let the world know exactly the kind of man he was. Not in anger. Not in revenge. Just in truth. You can have your money, I wrote. But you will never control this family again. I ended it with a single line. Choose wisely. The letter was delivered Monday morning, 9:30 a.m. By 10:15 a.m., Mark got a call from the trust attorney, not his dad. The guy said there had been a change in management, and Frank was voluntarily transferring oversight to a third-party fiduciary until Mark turned 40. Effective immediately. Mark was confused. He called his dad. Straight to voicemail. He sent a text. No reply. That night, Mark asked me, did you talk to him? I looked him in the eye and said, no. I didn't talk to him. Which was true. I didn't talk to him. I wasn't ready to tell him about the letter. Not yet. For the next 3 weeks, we heard nothing. Frank didn't reach out about the pregnancy. Didn't ask about our son. No holiday dinner invite. Nothing. Mark was clearly shaken, but I could see something else under the surface relief. He started spending more time at the new studio. He even started smiling again. Real smiles. We got the nursery set up. We painted. We bought tiny clothes. We even talked about baby names. It felt like a fog had lifted. But then came the twist. It was a Friday morning. I was making breakfast for our son when the landline rang. Yeah, we still have a landline because Frank insisted on it. Only professionals have landlines. I answered. It was Mara, Frank's executive assistant. She sounded panicked. Tara, I'm sorry to bother you. Is Frank okay? I said, what do you mean? He hasn't been to the office in 2 weeks. We thought maybe he was spending time with you. He canceled all his meetings. Investors are asking questions. I froze. Frank had always acted like nothing could touch him. But now, people were noticing. He wasn't just avoiding us. He was hiding. I told her I'd have Mark reach out. Hung up. Sat down. Stared at the wall. That night, I told Mark about the call. He sighed. I guess I should go see him. Mark went over the next day. Alone. I offered to go with him. He said no. He was gone for 4 hours. When he came home, his hands were shaking. He didn't speak for 10 minutes. Finally, he said, he knows. Apparently, Frank had the letter printed and highlighted on his desk. He kept pointing at it, asking Mark if he was the one who sent it. He screamed. He cried. He accused us of betrayal. Called me names. Said I was poisoning Mark. Then he got quiet and said, she's smarter than I thought. He told Mark he felt like everyone was watching him now. That the walls were closing in. Then he said the one thing that really hit Mark. I gave you everything and you gave me this. Mark didn't answer. He just walked out. 2 days later, weird stuff started happening. Mark's old college friend, Jeff, who works in real estate, texted him, hey man, I heard you're bankrupt? Need help selling the house? We were confused. Turns out, someone had started spreading rumors. Online and offline. That Mark had defaulted on his mortgage. That he was being cut off because of mental health issues. That I was taking advantage of him and isolating him from family. We traced it back to 2 sources. Both tied to people who worked for Frank's company. One of them? Frank's old golfing buddy. The other? A board member's wife. Frank was trying to destroy us socially. Subtly, but deliberately. I didn't want to go nuclear. But I had to send a message. So I sent a short email to a law firm Frank worked with for years. All I said was, hello, I have in my possession copies of communication and audio that suggest Mr. Frank's last name, engaged in financial coercion, intimidation, and abuse of fiduciary power over a beneficiary trust. These materials have not been released publicly yet. But I'd advise your client to stop spreading defamatory claims before we explore options for civil escalation. If he stops, we stop. Thank you. T. 2 hours later, Frank called Mark. His voice was flat. Tell her I get it. I won't fight. But she better stop too. 3 days later, we got an envelope in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Inside? A flash drive. That's it. No note. No explanation. I plugged it into an old laptop, fully expecting spyware or a virus. What I saw instead made my heart stop. Video files. Voice memos. Recordings. Of Frank. In meetings. At dinner parties. On phone calls. Saying things. Horrible things. About clients. About board members. About Mark. About me. Even about his own employees. And one clip in particular, him joking that he's not really the trustee, more like the warden. I don't know who sent it. But someone wants us to finish what we started. So, after the flash drive showed up, with no note, no warning. We watched all the files. Some were short clips. Some were long, full conversations. It was clear whoever sent it had access. These weren't accidental recordings. This was surveillance-level stuff. And then came the twist that made my stomach turn. We watched one of the longer clips late one night. It was dated 6 months before I wrote the letter. It showed Frank in what looked like a private dinner at his house with 2 men, both older, both dressed like lawyers or consultants. They were discussing something that sounded like restructuring the trust. At first it didn't click. But then one of the men said, and I quote, if you don't want Mark to have full control at 40, you'd need to prove mental unfitness before then. That process takes time. And it leaves a paper trail. Frank laughed. He's not unstable, he said. Just weak. But that might be enough. Let that sink in. Frank was exploring legal ways to declare Mark mentally unfit before he reached the age of full control over the trust. He was planning to steal his own son's future. Quietly. Legally. With lawyers on standby. I felt sick. The next day, I reached out, privately, to one of the names mentioned in the recording. I won't say who, but she used to work in Frank's legal department and left the company a year ago. I sent a vague message asking if she'd ever heard anything about the trust. I didn't mention the recordings. She replied within an hour. You need to talk to someone named Alex. Alex was a junior financial advisor in Frank's company. He worked under the guy who managed internal compliance. Young, sharp, and clearly nervous when we finally got on a call. I asked him, flat out, "Do you know anything about Frank trying to block Mark from accessing his trust at 40? Long pause. Then, I shouldn't say anything. But yes, I know exactly what he was planning. Apparently, Frank had been gathering documentation. Emails, insurance forms, even a therapy note from 5 years ago where Mark admitted he had mild anxiety, literally just standard stress from work and family stuff. Frank had ordered Alex and another employee to build a file that would be used to argue Mark was mentally vulnerable and not fit to manage substantial funds. It was a paper trail built on fragments, out of context, twisted, all designed to strip Mark of his control. That's what I asked Alex. He said Frank suddenly shut it all down about 2 months ago, right after he got the letter. Everything stopped. The files were deleted. Meetings canceled. His tone changed completely. He stopped trusting everyone. But someone on the inside made copies and sent them to us. We still don't know who sent the flash drive. But whoever it is, they're close. They had access to internal discussions. They wanted us to know everything. And it's not just about revenge anymore. This is bigger. Frank hasn't called Mark since the drive showed up. He's completely gone silent. No texts. No emails. Not even a burner call. But then yesterday, something new happened. Another envelope showed up. Same handwriting. Same plain packaging. Inside? A single sheet of paper. Typed. No signature. It read, "He's moving assets. Offshore. He's planning to transfer company shares to a private shell in Belize. Check the June filings. Look for Arroyo Holdings. Do it fast. No return address." Again. I looked it up. Guess what? Arroyo Holdings was registered in Belize just 3 weeks ago. The name on the registration? A lawyer who has worked with Frank before. It's real. Frank is trying to move everything quietly before we can do anything. So now we're sitting on a flash drive full of damaging recordings. Knowledge of a secret shell company. Confirmation he tried to declare his son mentally unfit. Proof that someone inside wants to take him down. But we don't know who we're fighting with yet. And we don't know if we're too late. Mark still doesn't know the full extent. I've been giving him pieces. Not because I don't trust him, but because I don't want him to panic. He's been through enough. And this baby is coming any day now. But I also know I can't keep the secret much longer. So much has happened in the last few weeks that I've barely had time to sleep, let alone write. But I owe it to all of you who followed the story, who reached out, who said, "This is abuse. You're not crazy." This post isn't about revenge anymore. It's about truth. And what happens when someone who's been controlled for decades finally snaps. After the second envelope came, the one warning us about Arroyo Holdings in Belize, I knew we had to act fast. I finally sat Mark down and told him everything. The letter. The recordings. The call with Alex. The shell company. I watched his face go pale. He didn't get angry. He just sat there, holding his head in his hands, whispering he was going to take everything from me, and I would have never known. Then he said something I'll never forget. He never loved me. Not really. Just the version he could control. That night, Mark called Frank. Not to yell. Not to beg. Just to say, "I know what you did. And I'm not afraid of you anymore." Mark wasn't the only one who deserved to know the truth. Frank had an upcoming investor board meeting, quarterly update, semi-public, with stakeholders attending both virtually and in person. It wasn't exactly open to the public, but Alex helped us get an invite link through a technical oversight. We uploaded the recordings to a secure folder, labeled each file by date. Nothing was edited. Just facts. 10 minutes before the meeting started, we emailed the link to every person on that Zoom call from the company email server Frank used to mock. We didn't say a word. We let his own voice speak for him. I don't know how it played out in real time because we weren't on the call. But 3 hours later, Frank's name was trending on LinkedIn, then Twitter, then the local Portland business news feed. Audio leaks from executive reveal questionable conduct, CEO faces scrutiny after internal whistleblower surfaces, abuse of trust. Legal experts weigh in. He tried to spin it at first. Claimed it was doctored, taken out of context, planted by enemies. But too many clips. Too much evidence. Too many witnesses. And now? Too many people willing to talk. Mara, his longtime assistant, resigned. Alex went public anonymously through a lawyer. Other employees came forward, confirming years of toxic behavior. The board? They acted fast. Frank was removed as CEO within 48 hours. Not a gentle retirement. Not a quiet exit. Terminated. Effective immediately. 3 days later, Frank showed up at our door. Unannounced. Mid-morning. I was home alone with our son. Mark was at the studio. I opened the door but didn't let him in. He looked wrecked. Puffy eyes. Unshaven. No suit. Just a wrinkled shirt and shaking hands. He held up a piece of paper. "Can I just leave this?" he said. "Please." I nodded. He placed it on the welcome mat and walked back to his car. That was it. No speech. No begging. No threats. Just a broken man walking away from a house he never had power over again. I waited for Mark to come home before we opened it. Inside, there were 2 things. 1. A handwritten note. 2. A certified letter from his new legal team stating that the trust was permanently relinquished to full third-party oversight, with Mark as the sole beneficiary and decision-maker, effective immediately, with no future clauses or restrictions. He gave up control. The note? Just 1 page. Mark, I don't know how to fix this. I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was building a legacy. Maybe I was just scared you'd build something without me. I was wrong. About everything. I don't expect forgiveness. But I had to let go before I destroyed both of us. Take care of your family. Be better than I was. Dad. Mark didn't speak for a long time. He stared at the letter, then at the trust documents, then back at me, and then he cried. The kind of cry I hadn't seen since his mother's funeral. Not just sadness. Grief. For what could have been. For the dad he never had. For the years wasted being small so someone else could feel big. He didn't say, I hate him. He didn't say, I forgive him. He just said, I'm free now. Family members found out. Some were supportive. Some weren't. His aunt, Frank's sister, texted me. You should have let the men handle it. You embarrassed the whole family. Blocked. Mara, the ex-assistant, emailed. He's been like this for years. You did what the rest of us were too scared to do. Alex? He's interviewing for roles in NYC. We wrote him a glowing reference. A girl. We named her Grace. The delivery was smooth. Quiet. Safe. Just the 3 of us. No threats. No calls. No strings attached. Mark held her like she was the only thing holding him up. And maybe she was. People think revenge is about making someone hurt. But for me, it was about ending the fear. Frank didn't just control the money. He made us second-guess everything we wanted. And I had to break that chain before it wrapped around our kids, too. I don't know if Frank will ever come back. Maybe this really is the end of him in our lives. But if he ever does, we'll be ready. Because now, we make the rules.